You ever have someone who smiles at you, apologizes, looks you dead in the eye, and then does the exact same thing again the next day? Not once, not twice, but over and over and over again, until one day something inside you just quietly snaps. And what you do next? It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it is absolutely unforgettable. Intro CTA. Before we dive in, if you love slow burn revenge stories that actually feel real, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment saying, label it. Because trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why. Detailed beginning. I work in what I describe as a perfectly average office. Not toxic, not amazing, just neutral. The kind of place where nothing dramatic ever really happens. Which is probably why this situation got under my skin so much. It's a small open-plan office. About 10 of us total. No cubicles, no walls. Just rows of desks arranged in clusters like we're all supposed to feel collaborative and connected, but in reality, it just means you can hear everything. Every keyboard tap, every sigh, every snack wrapper crinkle, and, unfortunately, every small, annoying habit people have. I'm a pretty routine-driven person. I come in at 8:45 every morning. Same time, same pace. I set my bag down, turn on my monitor, pull out my notebook, then I line things up on my desk. Almost without thinking. My coffee mug goes on the right, notebook in the center, pen holder slightly to the left, and in the top corner of my desk, I keep a small tray. It's nothing fancy, just a simple little organizer. But inside that tray, that's where I keep the things I actually use throughout the day. Lip balm, hand cream, a couple of snacks, hair tie, random small stuff. It's my space. And if you've ever worked in an open office, you know how rare that feeling is. Because most things in an office don't feel like yours. The chairs are shared. The kitchen is shared. Even the air feels shared. So when you carve out a tiny little area that feels like your own, you notice when something's off. Day one. The first time it happened, I almost didn't even register it. I came back from a quick coffee break, maybe 5 minutes tops, and sat down at my desk. Something felt different. You know that weird feeling? When nothing looks obviously wrong, but your brain is like, wait. I glanced at my tray. My lip balm was slightly out of place. Not gone. Just moved. I remember thinking, did I leave it like that? And then immediately dismissing it. I probably did, right? I mean, who notices something that small? I shrugged it off and got back to work. Day 3. A couple of days later, it happened again. This time, it wasn't just the lip balm. My hand cream had been used. Not a lot, but enough that I noticed. The cap wasn't screwed on properly. There was a faint smudge near the opening. Again, small, tiny, easy to ignore. But this time, I didn't feel confused. I felt aware. Day 5. By the end of the first week, I was paying attention. Not obsessively, just enough to notice patterns. And the pattern was simple. Whenever I stepped away, bathroom break, coffee run, quick chat with someone across the office, I'd come back, and something on my desk would be just slightly off. A pen missing, a snack wrapper opened, my stapler shifted to the edge of the desk. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't theft in the dramatic sense. It was casual. Like someone didn't think it mattered. The realization clicked on a Tuesday morning. I stood up to grab something from the printer, barely 10 feet away. And as I turned back toward my desk, I saw her. She was standing right there, leaning slightly over my workspace. her hand reaching toward my tray. And for a split second, I just froze, not because it was shocking, but because it was confirming. She noticed me almost immediately. Her hand paused midair. Then she smiled. "Oh, hey. I was just grabbing some lip balm. Hope that's okay." Just like that. Casual. Light. Like she was asking to borrow a pen in the middle of a conversation. I blinked. There was this tiny pause in my brain where I was deciding, do I make this awkward? Because technically, she asked. Even though she was already doing it. Even though she clearly had been doing it. I forced a small smile. Yeah. Just, next time, can you ask first? She nodded quickly. Of course. Sorry, I just forget sometimes. She said it so easily. So naturally. Like this was completely normal. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next day? Same thing. Different item. This time, it was a snack bar from my drawer. I didn't catch her in the act, but I saw the wrapper in the trash. Same brand. Same flavor. The one I specifically bring for myself. Again, I told myself, maybe she thought it was communal. Even though it was in my drawer. At my desk. The second conversation. A few days later, I decided to be clearer. Not aggressive. Just direct. I waited until there was a natural moment. She was at her desk, scrolling through something on her screen. I walked over, kept my tone calm. Hey, quick thing. I've noticed a few of my desk items being used while I'm away. Like the lip balm and snacks. I'd just appreciate it if you asked first. She looked up, immediately apologetic. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize. I just grab things sometimes without thinking. She laughed a little. Like it was a harmless quirk. I nodded. Yeah, I get it. Just, yeah. Ask first. Of course, she said again. Won't happen again. And yet, it did. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would justify a full confrontation. Just enough. Enough that every time I came back to my desk, I'd feel that tiny flicker of irritation. That quiet thought. Again? It wasn't about the items themselves. Lip balm isn't expensive. Snacks can be replaced. It was the disregard. The assumption. The way it kept happening even after I'd said something. Twice. The build-up. Weeks passed. And instead of stopping, it became almost routine. Not daily. Not predictable. But frequent enough that I couldn't ignore it. I started doing small tests. Leaving things in slightly different positions. Keeping track mentally. And every time, something would be off. Moved. Used. Taken. And returned like nothing happened. The internal shift. At first, I felt awkward bringing it up. Then I felt annoyed. Then something quieter. Something colder. I stopped reacting outwardly. But internally, I was done asking nicely. Because here's the thing about situations like this. It's never just about the object. It's about boundaries. And what happens when someone repeatedly steps over them, while smiling the whole time. The breaking point, almost. One afternoon, I came back from lunch, sat down, opened my drawer, and just stared. My snacks, neatly arranged that morning, were clearly disturbed. One was missing. I considered taking it further. Not dramatic, not confrontational, just official, documented, recognized, so that it wasn't just me quietly dealing with it anymore. I stared at my screen for a long moment, then opened a new message, hovered over the recipient, my manager, cliffhanger end, stop point. My fingers rested on the keyboard. I already knew what I was going to say. Simple, professional, calm. But something about that moment felt bigger than it should have, because once I sent that message, this stopped being a small annoyance and started becoming something else, something structured, something official, something that would lead to a solution. A very specific solution. So I sent the message. Simple, calm, professional, and for a moment, it felt like I had finally taken control, like things were about to be handled properly. But what I didn't realize was, sometimes when you try to fix something quietly, you don't solve the problem, you trigger something else. Short CTA. If you've ever dealt with a coworker who just wouldn't stop, drop a comment. I know this type. Because what happens next? It escalates in a way I never saw coming. Story continues. I didn't overthink the message. That was intentional. I didn't want it to sound emotional or exaggerated. Just factual, professional, controlled. I kept it short. Hi, just wanted to make you aware that I've had a recurring issue with a coworker using items from my desk without permission, even after I've asked them not to. It's mostly small things, but it's been consistent. Not urgent, just wanted it noted in case it continues. Thanks. I read it twice. No blame. No names. No drama. Then I hit send. The waiting. Nothing happened immediately, which, honestly, I expected. My manager wasn't the type to jump on things instantly. She was calm, methodical, the kind of person who processed things quietly before responding. So I went back to work, tried to focus, tried not to keep glancing at my inbox every 5 minutes. But there's something about sending a message like that. It lingers. Like you've slightly shifted the balance of something, even if no one else knows it yet. The reply. About an hour later, her response came through. Short, direct. Thanks for flagging. Let's have a quick chat later today. That was it. No tone, no emotion, just a meeting. The conversation. She called me into one of the small meeting rooms around 3 p.m. Those rooms always felt slightly too quiet, like the air itself was listening. I sat across from her at the small round table. She had a notebook in front of her, pen resting neatly on top. Calm posture, neutral expression. Thanks for bringing this up, she said. I nodded. Yeah, I just wanted it on record more than anything. She tilted her head slightly. Has it been ongoing for a while? About 3 months. Her eyebrows lifted, just slightly. 3 months. Yeah. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just deliberate. And you've already spoken to them directly? Twice. And it's still happening? I nodded. She leaned back slightly in her chair, thinking. Not rushing. Not reacting strongly. Just processing. Then she gave a small nod, like she'd reached a conclusion. Okay. Another pause. And then she said it. Calm. Certain. Completely sincere. The easiest solution here is probably just to label your personal items clearly. I blinked. Label them? She nodded. Yes. Just so there's no confusion about what belongs to you versus what might be considered shared office items. There it was again. That word. Confusion. Like this was a misunderstanding. Like someone reaching into my desk drawer. Was just unclear boundaries. I felt something tighten in my chest. But I kept my expression neutral. Right. She continued, still calm. If everything is clearly marked, then there's no ambiguity. And if it continues after that, we can address it more directly. There was logic there. Technically. On paper. But something about it felt like we had skipped a step. Or avoided something obvious. I nodded slowly. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. She gave a small, satisfied nod. Great. Let's try that first and see if it resolves things. The walk back. I left the meeting room feeling lighter, at least at first, because technically I had done what I was supposed to do. I spoke up. I documented it. I followed the process. And now there was a solution. Simple, clear, actionable. Label your personal items. The first shift. The next morning, I came in as usual. 8:45. Same routine. Same desk. Same tray. I sat down and looked at everything. My space. My items. My boundaries. And for a moment I just sat there, thinking. Because the more I replayed the conversation in my head, the more something didn't quite sit right. Not wrong. Just incomplete. But still, I had a solution. And solutions are comforting. The first strange event. That day I decided to do a small test. Nothing dramatic. I grabbed a sticky note, wrote my name on it, and placed it under my lip balm. Simple, visible, clear enough. I stepped away for a few minutes around mid-morning. When I came back, the lip balm was gone, and the sticky note? Still there. For a second, I just stared, because that didn't make sense. If the issue was confusion, then this should have helped, right? I glanced across the office, and there she was, again. My lip balm, next to her keyboard, same as before. The second event worse. The next day I tried again. This time, slightly more obvious. I wrote my name in bold marker on a small piece of paper and taped it directly to the lip balm. Not aggressive, just clear. No confusion. I even made sure it was facing outward. Impossible to miss. I left my desk, came back 10 minutes later. The label was gone. Not the lip balm. The label. Removed. Completely. And the lip balm? Still gone. That's when the feeling changed. From irritation to something sharper. Because now, this wasn't passive. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. The third event, panic starts. By the third day, I escalated slightly. Not fully. Just enough. I labeled 2 items. Lip balm and hand cream. Both clearly marked. Both visible. Both unmistakably mine. I left for lunch. Came back about 40 minutes later. Sat down. Opened my tray. Both items? Gone. Completely gone. Not moved. Not borrowed. Not nearby. Gone. My heart did that strange thing. That sudden drop. Like missing a step on stairs. I checked my drawer. Nothing. Looked under papers. Nothing. Then slowly, I lifted my eyes across the office, and there she was, again. Both items sitting casually on her desk, side by side, as if nothing had changed, as if the labels had never existed. The internal spiral. At that point, I didn't feel calm anymore. I didn't feel patient. I didn't feel like this was a small issue. Because something wasn't adding up. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was intentional behavior. And worse, it felt like it was escalating. The messages. That afternoon, I sent another message to my manager. More direct this time. Still controlled. Hi, just a quick update. I've started labeling items as discussed, but the issue is continuing. Labels are being removed, and items are still being taken. I hesitated before sending it, because now, this was becoming something bigger. But I sent it anyway. The response. Her reply came faster this time. Thanks for the update. Let's monitor it for a bit longer now that labeling is in place. Monitor it. That word again. Passive. Distant. Like this was something to observe, not address. The confusion grows. That evening, I sat at my desk longer than usual. Most people had left. The office was quieter. Phil. And I just looked at my space, my tray, my drawer, my things, trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Because now, it wasn't just annoying. It was strange. Why remove the labels? Why ignore them completely? Why continue after being asked multiple times? The realization begins. The next morning, I came in earlier than usual. About 8:15. No one else was there yet. The office felt different when it was empty. Almost staged. I walked to my desk, sat down, and slowly looked around. Everything was exactly where I had left it. Neat, organized, controlled. For a moment, it felt peaceful. Then I noticed something. Something small. Something I would have missed any other day. One of my pens. Wasn't mine. Same color. Same style. But not mine. I picked it up, turned it in my hand, and that's when it hit me. Not suddenly. Not dramatically, but like a slow, creeping understanding. This wasn't random. This wasn't careless. This wasn't even about the items anymore. This was something else entirely. Something deliberate. Something controlled. Something that had been happening longer than I realized. And in that moment, I stopped feeling like I was dealing with a careless coworker, and started feeling like I was part of something I didn't fully understand yet. I sat there, holding that pen, staring at my desk, as the quiet of the empty office pressed in around me. And that's when it fully clicked. This wasn't going to stop. Not with labels. Not with conversations. Not with patience. Because whoever was doing this wasn't reacting. Wasn't adjusting, wasn't even acknowledging it, which meant they weren't improvising. They were following something, a pattern, a decision, a plan. At first, I thought I was dealing with someone careless. Then I thought I was dealing with someone disrespectful. But sitting there, holding that pen that wasn't mine, in an office that suddenly felt unfamiliar, I realized something far worse. This wasn't random. This wasn't thoughtless. This was intentional. And I had just stepped into the middle of something that had already been set in motion. Story continues. I didn't move for a long time. The pen was still in my hand. My desk, my space, suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. Because now I wasn't just noticing things being taken. I was noticing things being replaced. Subtly, carefully, almost invisibly. The slow realization. I started looking closer. Not casually, not passively, but deliberately. I opened my drawer, shifted things around, checked items I hadn't thought about before. And once I started looking, I couldn't stop seeing it. The snack bars? Same brand, slightly different packaging. My stapler? Same model, but a tiny scratch I remembered gone. My pens? Similar, but not identical. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't obvious. It was precise. Like someone had been slowly swapping things out, piece by piece, over time. And suddenly, all those small moments, the moved items, the missing labels, the ignored conversations, they all connected. This wasn't about using my things. This was about replacing them, connecting the pattern. My mind replayed everything, every conversation, every apology, every "I forgot." And for the first time, those moments didn't feel careless. They felt rehearsed, controlled. Like just enough acknowledgement to keep things from escalating, but never enough to actually stop. I leaned back in my chair slowly, heart beating harder now, because this wasn't normal behavior. This wasn't even annoying behavior. This was methodical, the shift in perspective. And then something clicked, not just about her, but about the situation. Why hadn't my manager escalated it? Why had she immediately jumped to something so passive? Label your items. Not, I'll speak to them. Not, we'll address this. Just, make it clearer. Like she was avoiding something, or like she already knew something. The realization deepens. I stood up, walked slowly to the break room, poured coffee I didn't even want, and just stood there, thinking, because if this had been happening for 3 months, there was no way I was the only one who had noticed something. So I tested it, casually, subtly. I asked a coworker later that day, "Hey, random question, have you ever noticed things on your desk being moved?" They paused, just for a second, then shrugged. "Not really." Why? Too quick. Too neutral. That answer didn't feel honest. It felt safe. The full reveal. That night, I didn't go home and relax. I went home and thought, and replayed everything. Until finally, it all aligned. This wasn't about me. Not really. This was about control. She wasn't just taking things. She was testing boundaries, seeing what she could get away with. Gradually, quietly, and when I spoke up, when I pushed back, she didn't stop. She adapted, removing labels, replacing items, continuing the behavior, but making it harder to prove, harder to explain, harder to escalate. Because now if I complained, it would sound paranoid. "They're replacing your items? Are you sure?" And suddenly, I understood the genius of it. Chaos intensifies. The next few days were different. Not externally. Externally, everything looked normal. But internally, I was spiraling. I started noticing everything, questioning everything, doubting everything. Was this mine? Had this always been here? Did this always look like this? I began taking photos of my desk before leaving, checking them the next morning, comparing details, tiny details. And the worst part? Sometimes, I couldn't tell. The breaking point. I tried explaining it to a friend over the phone. Halfway through, I stopped, because even I could hear it. How it sounded. "Wait, so they're taking your stuff, but replacing it with similar stuff?" "Yeah. And you're sure it's not just you forgetting?" I went quiet, because for the first time, that doubt crept in. Not about the situation, but about myself. Emotional breakdown. That's when it hit hardest. Not the frustration, not the anger, but the uncertainty. Because when something becomes just confusing enough, just subtle enough, you stop trusting your own perception. And that's exactly where I was, sitting at my desk, looking at my things, feeling like I was losing grip on something simple, the acceptance phase. And then, something changed. Not suddenly, but gradually. I stopped checking, stopped documenting, stopped trying to prove anything, because I realized something important. Even if I was right, I couldn't win this the way I was trying to. Not through complaint, not through tracking, not through logic, because the game wasn't being played on those terms. The final shift. So I let go. Not completely, but enough. I stopped reacting, stopped engaging, stopped giving it attention, and slowly, something interesting happened. It faded, not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. The items stopped moving, stopped changing, stopped disappearing, like whatever had been happening no longer had a reason to continue. The twist. And one day, we made eye contact, just briefly, crossed the office, no smile, no apology, no acknowledgement, but something was there, something subtle, understanding, not friendly, not hostile, just recognition. And in that moment, I felt something I didn't expect, respect, not for the behavior, but for the intelligence behind it. Because this wasn't random, this wasn't careless, this was calculated, and I had stepped into it, without realizing the rules. The silence returns. Eventually, everything went back to normal. My desk stayed untouched. My items stayed where I left them. The office returned to that same quiet, neutral rhythm, like nothing had ever happened. But I knew better, because once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. Some people don't confront you. They don't argue. They don't raise their voice. They just shift things, small things, subtle things, until you're the one questioning reality. And the most unsettling part? They never have to prove anything, because the moment you sound unsure, you've already lost. Final message. So if something feels off, pay attention, but don't let it consume you, because not every battle is meant to be won directly, and not every opponent plays fair. Sometimes, the smartest move is knowing when to step back and let the silence win. Final CTA. If this story made you think, hit like, subscribe, and comment. I see it now, because once you do, you really do.